This is Dan of Vagabond Awake, the YouTube channel for vagabondbuddha.com. Here are my top 15 favorite places to retire cheap internationally for 2020 for year-round retirement. Year-round means you have to include retirement weather in the off-season in your consideration. Cheap means it must be possible for a cheap single person to live there for $1,500 a month or less. There are even a few in the list where people are able to live on $800 a month. In the next 2 weeks, I'll be ranking places around the world for other qualities like best white sand beaches in the world, best colonial era towns in the world, and best small towns in the world. So subscribe so you can watch those also. Okay, my methodology. I'm normally more scientific in picking my favorites, but this year I decided to rank them purely based upon my gut reaction to being in all these places. My method only works if you have spent considerable time in each place, which I have. You can get all of the 50 plus retire early for cheap paradise reports at vagabondbuddha.com. Now I will show you pictures of my top 15 places to retire cheap internationally as I read my paragraph about each. Full reports of each town, as I say, are available at Vagabond Buddha. I will read these in reverse order, so you have to wait until the end to hear my top 3 picks. At the end, I will tell you how to get the list in writing so you don't have to take notes. Okay, here we go. Top 15 favorite places to retire cheap internationally for 2020, starting with my least favorite and moving forward to my most favorite. Number 15th is Kampot, Cambodia. Kampot is not a place for the average Western-style consumer. The simplicity of life here would be unbearable for most Westerners. Kampot doesn't really excel in any one category in my mind as compared to other retire cheap in paradise locations around the world, but it somehow just grows on you. This is the slowest pace of living anywhere in the world. The center of this colonial era city is full of foreign-owned restaurants charging about $4 to $6 per meal, but the local-owned restaurants have meals starting around $1. The smell of marijuana is everywhere in the air. There's a gentle river flowing through town and kayaking several places upstream. The sun sets over gorgeous mountains as you drink $1 beers on the top of houseboat bars that line the river in the center of the city. It's a beautiful place. Merida, Mexico, 14th on the top 15, moving towards number 1. Merida has one of the first cities the Spanish built in the Americas. The Spanish used stones from the previous ancient city to erect the churches, government buildings, and homes of wealthy invading colonists. Merida still enjoys the arts, literature, and music from the original Americans who have maintained their culture here to some extent. Merida is just 20 minutes from the turquoise water and white sand beaches of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, so you're right near the beautiful ocean and white sand. There are nearby cenotes, the famous Pink Lake, and the colonial-era Central Park in the center of Merida with a Catholic church built in 1596. You'll notice remnants of the castle walls as you stroll about. The streets surrounding the Central Park, or Zocalo, are blocked off on weekends and families stroll about. The nightlife goes late into the evening with many types of live music, including jazz, mariachi, and techno. Merida has been attracting expats over the last few decades because of the tropical climate, beautiful beaches, low cost of living, cultural diversity, and colonial homes that are fun to renovate and occupy. Okay, number 13, 13th most favorite place, Arequipa, Peru. Arequipa is a gorgeous colonial era city in the Andes in the southern part of Peru. Walk along the cobblestone streets and you'll find an endless array of both foreign and domestic restaurants. The Central Park is a gorgeous place to spend an evening as the sun goes down, and the city lights the cathedral built in 1566. I could live easily in Arequipa, and the cost of living is reasonable. The only thing that makes me hesitate at all is that it felt a little too cool. In the middle of the day, you can walk around wearing only a single layer year-round. But after about 4 p.m., it gets cool fairly quickly, so bring a jacket or a sweater. Okay, Cuenca, Ecuador, my 12th most favorite city. Cuenca is on almost everyone's retire cheap and paradise lists, and it's easy to see why. It is a smaller colonial era city in the Andes in Ecuador at the perfect elevation, so it stays cool even in the warmest summer months. Expats have been coming here for decades because the city center is really a colonial era showpiece with many of the best restored buildings in South America. Somehow the cost of living here has remained relatively low and stable, partly because Ecuador uses the American dollar for its currency. There are multiple large public markets where you can buy fresh fruits and vegetables from locals, and even an expat grocery store where you can get foods from home. Okay, next up, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, my 11th most favored retire cheap and paradise location. Kuala Lumpur is a large modern city with all the conveniences that implies. It has several of the most beautiful and modern malls, hotels, resorts, and public transportation in Southeast Asia. All the famous movies from all over the world play in multiple languages, and all of the most famous expensive brands in the world have stores in the malls in KL. If Singapore and Bangkok had a baby, they would name it Kuala Lumpur. It's not as gritty as Bangkok, nor as boring and as expensive as Singapore. It's not for everyone, but if large, organized, clean, and safe cities are your thing, you'll love it in Kuala Lumpur. Okay, number 10, Porto, Portugal. It has a beautiful landscape and a romantic yet safe feeling to it. It's like living in a storybook. The central area of Porto is highly walkable. Porto has gorgeous ancient architecture. It's like walking through a living museum with single-lane cobblestones, pre-vehicle streets in many parts. There are beaches, wine tours, symphony, many food choices, hiking, biking, great day trips, weekend getaways, sports stadiums, sailing, water sports, cruising, parks, nature, etc. Porto has an old world charm that you usually only find in more expensive cities. Plus, it has the Lidl grocery store chain, which sells amazing gourmet foods for really cheap. Porto is the best cheap base to explore Western Europe. It's a little cooler than I normally like, but it reminds me of San Francisco, California weather, near where I grew up, and I love that place too. Okay, moving to number 9, Penang, Malaysia. Hours will feel like minutes as you stroll around Georgetown colonial era and spot colorful street art around every corner. The number one attraction here is finding the best Mama's restaurant in town for a $1 to $2 meal. Once you taste the amazing local foods, you'll have a hard time convincing yourself to pay $8 to $10 US in the tourist restaurants. As a former British colony, people are still required to speak English in many schools here. There are art galleries listed, things to do, music and nightlife, and arts and entertainment. The Canteen and China House restaurant is still listed as the premier live music forum. Make sure to take our beach and Buddha tour, the street art tour, our old town walking tour, our nightlife tour, and try our favorite restaurants on our restaurant list. Most of our Retire Cheap in Paradise reports include all of these types of information. I'm mentioning it from Penang, but it's in all of the reports. Okay, Guanajuato, Mexico, coming in at number 8. This gorgeous colonial era city has some of the richest architecture in all of Mexico. Most streets are so skinny or steep, automobiles can't drive down them. Many streets are underground, so the surface feels like a small European village. The Valenciana silver mine produced 2/3 of the world's silver for 200 years, which is why the architecture is so gorgeous here. I love it here because it's a city in rolling hills. It has the highest walkability factor I've ever seen. After our arrival from the bus station, we've only gotten into a vehicle once. There's Lebanese, Chinese, Thai, Japanese, Mexican, Argentinian, and French. For a town this size, it has a very active nightlife if you like live music, concerts, theater, modern dance, probably because it is a university town with all the dynamic life that implies. Okay, going to number 7, Camiguin Island in the Philippines. Camiguin's a small island with a fairly low density of people. If you're looking for less civilization and more nature, this may be your place. There are several waterfalls cascading down the sides of the fairly dormant volcano-filled mountains, landing in swimmable pools of water. There are a few hidden white sand beaches on the island itself, but mostly you'll need to visit the even smaller islands just 1 or 2 kilometers off Camiguin. You can grab a ferry to do that. You can snorkel, scuba dive, fish, ride bikes and scooters, and visit with the beautiful locals. Here are a few really good restaurants and many more local food restaurants. There is one small mall and daily ferries to larger islands to the north and south. Make sure to check out the 100-year-old clams. We have several tours you can take in our Retire Cheap report. It's one of those tours. Okay, coming in at number 6, Oaxaca, Mexico. Oaxaca state has a large indigenous population, with 50% of the population in different indigenous cultures speaking different local languages. Oaxaca City hosts the Indigenous Festival, the largest, most famous indigenous festival in the world, held annually to celebrate their native culture of music, costumes, dance, and food. Some of the most well-preserved ancient ruins in Mexico are nearby in Monte Alban and Mitla. Oaxaca is at a perfect elevation, so it's not too warm in the summer or too cold in the winter. The indigenous people suffered great hardship under the Aztecs and then again when the Spanish showed up in 1521. The colonial era center of the city is one of the most beautiful and well-preserved of anywhere in the world. The Central Park, or Zocalo, is a joy to experience night and day with music, dance, and beautiful foods in restaurants and food carts. This is my favorite city in Mexico. Okay, coming in at number 5, Dumaguete, Philippines. Dumaguete itself is a quaint little city that you may not expect to find in the top 5 places to retire. But the city has everything you need in terms of public market, restaurants, grocery stores, with many international foods. Plus there's a central city area where you can live and walk everywhere. But I would prefer to live up the hill a bit, 8 kilometers, in a smaller city called Valencia. There are hot springs, waterfalls, and public markets, but you'll need a scooter to get around or a small car. The real fun starts when you hop on a ferry to one of the beautiful islands like nearby Apo or Siquijor. It's sort of like Camiguin, but more people and business to make everyday life a little easier and more diverse. Plus, it's a university town, which has influenced the dynamic nature of the city and has one of the best hospitals and medical schools in the islands. Coming in at number 4, Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I've been going to Playa del Carmen since about 1992. The beaches have suffered some erosion, but you can still find beautiful stretches of white sand beaches with turquoise blue water. You'll not be able to stay within a cheap budget if you try to live within a few blocks of the beach and tourist apartments, so go in about 5 to 8 blocks. You can run on the beach in the morning and walk on the beach at night. There are super expensive tourist restaurants near the beach and on 5th Avenue. But if you eat at the local family-style restaurants and cook mostly at home, you should be able to live in this true paradise for cheap. If you'd like to live in a more Mexican-feeling village, stay a few miles south in Tulum, in the village about 1 kilometer behind the fancy beach resorts of Tulum. These 2 places, Tulum and Playa del Carmen, are just a $1 bus ride apart on a local colectivo. See the reports for more details on that. Okay, coming to number 3 in the world of my favorite top places to retire cheap is Hoi An, Vietnam. Old Town Hoi An is a walk back even before the 16th century when Europeans arrived in sailing vessels to trade with the Far East. The architecture and foods reflect an integration of East meets West and the best of each rubbed off on Called This Home. There are tree-lined 2-lane streets with flowers hanging from second-floor balconies and open street markets overflowing with fresh flowers, fruits, and vegetables. People can try flavors that cost 5 times as much and are not as fresh as home. A beautiful beach is just a 6-kilometer bicycle ride away. There are 4 museums in Hoi An and 10 art galleries. By the way, you can stay at the beach if you prefer. You can dance the night away and get up in the morning and go to yoga. Grab the bus to Da Nang for $2 or a minivan to a hill station called The Lot for $11. Stay the weekend or a week if you like. Number 2 in the world, Bali, Indonesia. Ubud is a beautiful traditional village in the mountains of Bali where many people love to stay and eat many of the healthy international food restaurants. This is one of the most famous tourist destinations in the world. It was, of course, beautiful. The landscape, the beaches, the people. The joys of this relatively small island are spread out everywhere. So you'll need to have a vehicle or rent a scooter like most people. Make sure to ride your scooter to Utawala on the southern tip of Bali to see the fishermen boats, the local fish market, and children dressed in their school uniforms. Also, take the ferry over to Lembongan for the weekend and visit the famous cliff beaches and umbrella graveyards. Finally, bring your camera with you when you visit the terraced rice fields when they are in full green before harvest. Okay, now the number 1 place in the world, my favorite place, is Nha Trang, Vietnam. This well-known beach town of Vietnam, it has some beautiful beach right in front of the city and more private ones north and south. It's one of the best places in the world to enjoy a beautiful beach with a city behind it that has delicious, cheap food and accommodations. Sure, you can pay an arm and a leg here in Nha Trang if you like, but once you try my best cheap food places at sidewalk restaurants, you won't pay more except on special occasions. There are proper vegan and vegetarian restaurants with many kinds of meat substitute dishes that are delicious. We stayed in a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment 1 block from the beach for $15 a night with equipped a kitchen, Wi-Fi, and balcony. I loved running on the beach every morning and walking along the ocean at night. There's nothing like a world-class city on the beach, but living cheap also? Are you kidding me? Okay, at this point you're probably thinking, why is Thailand not on the list? Good question. I had Chiang Mai, Thailand as number 1 on my list last year, but over the last few years the Thai government has shown little interest in attracting or maintaining retiree expats. If you are already there and are happy, then I'm not recommending you depart. But I do not recommend making any long-term plans to be in Thailand over the next few years. Let's see how Thailand reacts to the coronavirus. Maybe the loss of tourism money will get them to open their welcome gates to retiree expats again. I do still recommend Thailand as one of the great places to visit for a month or 2, but it just doesn't belong on my top 15 favorite places to retire cheap internationally for 2020. There's many better bases around it and you can just visit it from time to time. Okay, subscribe so you'll see when I post my top places according to several other Retire Cheap criteria, such as best white sand beaches in the world, best colonial era towns in the world, and best small towns in the world. So subscribe so you can watch those. Okay, thanks for watching my top 10 favorites. To get my list of the top 10, visit the link, the more information link in the notes below this YouTube video, or come to Vagabond Buddha and click the travel tab. While you're there, make sure to grab a free copy of my ebook. Look towards the top where it says free ebook. And my ebook's called How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 13 years. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.